Welcome to another episode of CXO, where we talk to leaders in business and technology making waves, so to speak. And today we are very lucky to have one person who's gone into an industry that I really don't understand, but probably I'll learn a few things today. And that is Jay Shapiro. Jay Shapiro, who is the founder and CEO of Osiku Games. Jay,
Thanks,
welcome.
Harry.
Welcome to the studio.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks so
Yeah,
much.
good stuff, man. What is gaming? But before that, before that, so who's Jay?
So thanks so much for having me. I'm a tech entrepreneur. Been doing this for about 25 years, all in digital. I started my life in advertising in Singapore originally, and created a digital marketing agency that we grew in 1999 in the days before Google or YouTube or Facebook and that kind of thing, and grew that to become the fourth largest digital agency in the world. Sold that to WPP in 2007, and I joined the global board for WPP Digital. It was a really exciting time. .com boom days,
Wow.
And what's interesting is I sold that business in the exact month that Steve Jobs launched the first iPhone.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew instantly that mobile was going to be the next thing.
Mm.
And, we've gone from selling these big multi-million-dollar websites for Singapore Airlines, Cisco Systems, Microsoft, and that sort of thing, down to zero today where they can make a WordPress site for free.
Yeah.
And I knew the same thing was going to happen in mobile, and I decided this time to create the problem rather than suffer from it.
Okay.
And so I created a business called AppMaker, AppMakr, that became the world's largest Android publisher.
Wow.
Over 3.5 million apps published in more than 100 countries. And then I sold that business and moved here to Kenya about 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Knew I wanted to start something again.
Mm-hmm.
As you can tell, I'm sort of more focused on building industries rather than building businesses.
Yes.
And so looked around to see, where was the untapped opportunity across Africa. And of course the youth, population jumped out at me, the internet connectivity that happens here, and the complete lack of a gaming industry. It was essentially zero at the time. And so I created initially Osiku Games, based here in Nairobi, and then expanded that across the continent to what's now called PAG, Pan-African Gaming Group. And we have 11 studios all across Africa.
Wow. That's awesome. I didn't know you had gone across Africa.
Yeah. We cover from Egypt and Tunisia in the north to Cape Town in the south, and from Dakar in the west to Ethiopia and Kenya in the east, and a bunch of countries in between.
Mm-hmm.
We're by far the largest game developer on the continent now. About 300 people, more than 200 games published. It's really exciting.
So let me take you back.
Sure.
How did you get to where you started from?
I took the bus. How did I get to where I started from? Wow. The through line on my career really has all been about storytelling,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
And using digital means to do that and helping ordinary people tell stories, right? Whether that was originally through marketing and advertising, through mobile apps, or now through games, that's the consistent part.
Mm-hmm.
And in between some of those, I did a nonprofit foundation called DoGoodAsYouGo.org, which was a network of about 500 volunteers doing skills transfer workshops at street kid shelters and orphanages around the world. And Osiku Games, which we started here, is really the combination of all of that. It's storytelling, it's digital, and it's social impact. Because the games that we make are all about creating system change and behavior change and education through gamification.
So Kirk, what I'm interested in is did you go to school to learn digital? Did you were you inspired by somebody to go into the digital space? Because that was like really early years of digital, right?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. So first of all, from a school perspective, I have a computer science degree. I did a communication studies degree. And then I did an MBA in international marketing and focused really on emerging markets. So from a schooling perspective, that's kind of the combination thereof. But so much of my influence really came from my father. He was a tinkerer. We had very, very early computers, 1976 probably. 75 was our very first one, a little kind of pocket calculator kind of thing. And then we went through all the Commodores, the Amigas, the, laptop luggables and all that sort of thing. So yeah, I've been sort of programming and involved in computers really from the very beginning, which is nice today because it gives me a sense of perspective of how things are going, you know? So for example, everybody's so excited about AI today, right?
Yes.
And I myself, I've spent a lot of time playing around with Midjourney, ChatGPT, etc., right? But, you know, my main career is around gaming. And I remember when we first got Pong as a game, right? The world went crazy for Pong, right? I mean, it was so cool and nobody's ever seen anything like it before, but it was Pong, right? And if you compare Pong to like Fortnite today, right? That is ChatGPT 4 versus what it's going to be 5 or 10 years from now, right? We're at Pong now, right?
On AI.
On AI, right? And it's important to have that perspective,
Yes.
right? Because where it is today, super cool, but it's nothing compared to where it's going.
Yeah. But I was looking at some statistics when I was, preparing for this, and I saw Pac-Man. You know Pac-Man?
Of course, yeah, it's the ringtone on my phone.
And I think it's made something like $13 billion US.
Yeah.
From was it like 1980 something?
One quarter at a time.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Because when you play these games, you don't think about the commercial value of them. Yeah. But how big is this gaming industry?
So if you take all of Hollywood, and all of the music industry, and you combine them, and then double it, gaming is still bigger. It's a $240 billion US industry today, growing massively.
Wow.
And when you look at that on a global scale, Africa is a rounding error. It's essentially zero, right? It historically has. And yet, through sheer demographics, it's at this point now inevitable that Africa is going to become a top 3 market globally in mobile games. We have more than 400 million internet-connected smartphones already, more than all of the US, Canada, Mexico combined, right? That's growing at 20% compounding annually. The US is growing at 2%, right? We're going to bypass India from a smartphone population by 2026. Okay? There are a billion youth here. And so all of the major gaming companies, studios, your Activisions, your Microsoft, your Electronic Arts, etc., who are public listed companies and have this constant quarterly pressure for growth from the analysts, they need to find that growth somewhere. And the reality is in the global markets that Europe is aging out. Median age is 54, right? Asia is completely dominated by the Chinese players. The US market was in the doldrums even before COVID. And South America is a mess, right? Economically, between Argentina, Brazil, Venezuela, etc. So all eyes are on Africa at the moment. This is the single market globally for double-digit growth in the gaming sector. Currently, we have 12% of the world's smartphones. If we get even 1% of the gaming industry, that's still a $2.5 billion industry, which for Africa is massive. And so that's what I'm so excited about. That's what we're building.
So what do we need to do to get to that 12%?
There's a lot of investment that needs to happen in capacity building around talent development, right? A small studio in the US is 10,000 people. Okay? We have probably less than 1,000 total in the industry in Africa at the moment. We need those people. They're going to have to come from other industries. So we're pulling people out of traditional IT. We're pulling people out of advertising, etc., visual effects, video production, that sort of thing, and bringing them together into the gaming industry. And when you talk about game development, so many people think that means coding, programming, somebody sitting at a keyboard writing code. That's like maybe 10% of the business, right? It's illustrators and animators and musicians, storyboarding, writers, and, voice artists, right? Translation, marketing, finance, legal, IP. There's so much involved. It's a huge, huge industry. And that's what we need to build.
I think a lot of in the African population, I don't think we really understand. The way you've just expounded that opportunity. If you're looking at animators, you're looking at artists, you're looking at coders for that 20%. You're looking at people who understand different technologies who bring it together. I think when you extrapolate it in that manner, then it's sort of understood. But do you think, for instance, governments or agencies within governments understand the value or the scope of gaming in Africa?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I hate to say Africa, right? Because we're 54 different countries with different governments and all that kind of thing, right? So I think there's pockets for sure. Pockets of innovation, pockets of understanding, pockets of policy, right? And regulation. Because of the youth demographic, this bulge that is coming through the continent at the moment, we have a need to create 7 million new jobs per year. It's an impossible, right? In order to absorb this population. For governments to try and create those large scale opportunities for jobs, if you say, okay, we're going to do automotive, we're going to bring automotive manufacturing here. And certainly there's been a big push in Kenya for e-mobility, electric vehicles and that sort of thing, right? That requires billions of investment in factories and logistics and supply chains, etc., right? Gaming is easy. Give somebody a laptop and some teaching and some tutoring, and they can be productive and have a job and start creating. And I firmly believe that talent is equally distributed around the world, but the opportunities are not. And so what we're all about doing is bringing those opportunities to the continent from existing studios externally, internationally, but also through the domestic markets. These billion youth that we have, we're creating games that are made in Africa for Africa, with the opportunity to monetize those and keep the revenue here in Africa, which is something we've been really bad at historically. When you look at the mobile sports betting industry, right? Your Sport Pesa, Betika, and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
In 2020, just before COVID, the last year that we have good statistics, in the top 5 markets, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Nigeria, South Africa, those 5 markets, that was $37 billion a year in just mobile sports betting, which is essentially a pacifier for boredom, kind of like gaming, right? And people say, oh, well, that's gambling. But actually, the net win, average net win on Sport Pesa was like 12 bob, right? Nobody's doing this for the money. It's about the boredom, right? And that dopamine hit that you get about the potential of maybe winning.
Yes.
Right? And yet, all of those companies, Sport Pesa is Bulgaria, other ones are China, US, UK, that sort of thing. That's $37 billion a year that was leaving the continent, right? We can do a much better job than that. We can keep that revenue here, creating jobs here and creating value in the economy here. And that's what PAG is all about.
So where do you see the business? Is it in the development of the games, or is it in the playing of the games because it's play to earn? Where is the business?
So we really see sort of 3 main sectors where the gaming industry in Africa. Number one is as a factory, right? Low-cost labor production of international Western games made in Africa. And certainly
So
that's
almost like an outsource.
like an outsourced factory, essentially, right? And that's really the model that India has followed. So if you look at almost all our major big game productions that happen in the West, they're actually built in India. Okay? It's not talked about a lot, but that's really the foundation of the gaming industry in India, right? There's the opportunity for us to do that here in Africa. I'm not a big fan of it, right? And certainly in South Africa, that's happened already. There's a few studios that are doing games for Western market. It's easier to monetize, but it's not who we are, right? If you look at the number one hyper-casual game on mobile last year in 27 countries around the world, it was actually a Kenyan game.
Oh, really? Which one?
Made by Meccan Studios, called The President. 11 million downloads.
Wow.
Something like that. Yeah. 0 users in Africa. Right? Because that's not their market. Because they monetize based on advertising, and there's no good advertising CPM rates here in Africa today. Right? The second opportunity is really Africa as a market. Right? looking at those billion youth as consumers and players. And how do you create games for them, right? And certainly we're seeing international players like Xbox coming into Africa. The Xbox Game Camp is running this July in Africa for the first time. And so there's a huge opportunity there for that. And then the third one is really as innovation hub, right? And we're seeing that particularly in cities like Nairobi, where you're getting a lot of the innovation centers coming in from people like Google, people like Visa. A lot of the Web3 blockchain companies are setting up here because the reality is this is a very cheap, fast place to iterate and make mistakes, right? And learn and then expand, right? And like they used to say about New York, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere, right? Because it's really hard here. And if it succeeds here, it'll work anywhere, right? And we have some real practical social problems that exist in society that things like blockchain can solve here that don't exist in other parts of the world in terms of land registries, voting, those kinds of things. Fractional ownership of livestock, you know, those kinds of things, right? And so those are really the three ways we're seeing the industry develop.
Let's switch a bit. In terms of trends, what are you seeing? You mentioned blockchain. That's one of the big trends that I think is impacting the gaming industry. So is metaverse. What else are you seeing?
Yeah, I find that metaverse is not as much of a factor here because Africa is very much a mobile-first continent, right? Everybody has a smartphone. Very few people have consoles. Very few people have gaming PCs, right? That's kind of what's required for big 3D metaverse type projects, particular VR and all that. It just doesn't exist here, right? And so Africa is very much more focused on casual and hyper-casual mobile games, the kind of things that you play in a matatu while sitting in traffic for 15 minutes or between classes or while you're waiting for a friend. Things like Candy Crush and Angry Birds and those kinds of things, right? That's what I think we're going to see a lot more here. The second opportunity that's very different here from other markets is really gamification for education and for social impact. The reality is that there are some big challenges on the continent around quality of education, access to consistent education, and particular social challenges around sexual reproductive health, financial literacy, climate change, etc. And the youth population today are largely deaf to any traditional messaging that comes from an NGO or government, right? If the government says wear a mask and stay at home, they'll ignore it, right? But if you take those messages and you embed them within an entertainment gaming experience and you infer the learnings, then it gets through.
Actually, that reminds me of a friend of mine. He has a company called Malio Games.
Sure.
Hugo. Yes, Hugo, and they had this mosquito, the slap, which was used to educate guys on on malaria.
That's right.
Yeah, so that kind of that's what you're saying.
Absolutely. In fact, we've worked with them on creating an entrepreneurship training in West Africa for the tourism sector. Again, it's a great way of showing how gamification can be used as a tool for creating powerful education.
I think you had several trends that you're seeing.
Yeah. So education, social impact, certainly. Casual games, certainly. The other thing is that, the continent has thousands of years of amazing legends and stories that the world has never been exposed to,
Like where I come from, there was this heroine called Mekatilili Wamenza. Have you heard of? Okay. Yeah.
So it's sharing those stories, which through movies and film was expensive and difficult, right? But people in all kinds of markets are interested in those stories. They're frankly bored of a lot of the same stories over and over again that exist in the Western markets. And so I think there's a huge opportunity there to bring the continent's stories to the rest of the world.
So how we grew up, and a lot of, I think, African boys, especially boys, will tell you is you were always scolded at for playing games and all that stuff. And now gaming is such a big. Can we create millionaires out of gaming?
So, there's two things. One is your experience growing up
Mhm.
is a universal, right?
Mhm.
That's not unique to Africa. It's all around the world. Games, play as a whole
Yeah.
is one of the few universals in the world, right? Wherever you go in the world, people play,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so part of what we're doing is taking the traditional African games, Mancala, Bano, that
Yeah.
sort of thing, bringing them into the digital environment as well, and creating modern mobile games that people can experience and enjoy those traditions,
Mm-hmm.
right? And recognizing and tapping into that core element of play,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, is there opportunity for those or any games to create millionaires? Absolutely. Absolutely. You look at some of the businesses like Epic Games, and these are multi-billion-dollar industries. It's inevitable it will happen in Africa.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So there's one question as we come to a close. I ask all my guests who come here. Yeah. and this is something that nobody in WPP, in Osiku Games, you just tell us one thing that none of those people, anyone who's worked with you, doesn't about you.
My favorite color is purple. No, that's a simple answer. Nobody knows about me. I used to deliver phone books. My very first business, 1993, my first internet business, failed miserably.
Oh.
It was called FaxNet, and it was about taking the daily fax reports that United Parcel Service, UPS,
Mm-hmm.
sends from all their stations back to headquarters. They spend $3 million a year on long distance just for faxes. Mm-hmm. And this was early days of the internet. And so I created a device that would connect to the back of an existing fax machine and send it through the internet for free.
Mm-hmm.
And they loved it, took us to a VC, and the business got rejected because they said they'll never let you put that much data through the internet.
And now?
And well, of course, right? And so basically went bankrupt, and hit a real low in my life, and was delivering phone books for a living. Yeah,
These are the big
big phone books
yeah.
back in the day.
We used to call them directories.
Exactly.
Phone directories.
Phone directory.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. And so, I mean, I think that's a great example of the entrepreneur journey. That it's not always about making millions, and it's not always glamorous. It's about a lot of failure and learning from that. And I'm not embarrassed. I have failed a number of times.
Mm-hmm.
But I learn every time. And you do what you have to do, even if that's delivering phone.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Jay.
Thanks for having me.
It's been nice talking to you. And there you have it, guys. Failure is normal. You can fail fast, but what you need to do is make sure that you wake up, dust yourself, and move forward. So that's all we have for you today on CXO. See you in the next episode. Thank you.